Hey guys, for this topic of photosynthesis, I decided to record my lecture and give you a chance to learn the process on your own at your own pace. Okay, as you're going through this recording, please complete the foldable, and of course, if you have any questions at any time, just let me know. So as of right now, your foldable needs to be looking something like this. The front should have a title. It should have the chloroplast drawn, obviously a lot better than this. It needs to look something like this with all the components, the inputs and the outputs listed. The back needs to have the formula of the process, the basics of photosynthesis, and your name. All of this was completed last class. If you don't have it done, please pause the video and do this first. Okay, here's the picture for the front of your foldable, and here's the slide for the basics of photosynthesis, including the chemical equation or formula given there as well. When learning about photosynthesis, you have to start from broad to specific. So here we are looking at the big picture. This process occurs in the chloroplast, an organelle found in autotrophic organisms like plants, algae, and some bacteria. Okay? The inside of the chloroplast, which was previewed for you a few units ago, looks something like this. So here is a chloroplast found in this leaf of a plant, obviously. Okay, the chloroplast itself has two major components. The thylakoids, also called grana, when they're stacked like this, or looking at them stacked is called a grana. And then the cytoplasm, the liquid around it, it's called the stroma. Okay, so thylakoids, stroma, and we also talked about how chloroplasts have two membranes, outer membrane, inner membrane. This also should remind you of the endosymbiotic theory, which claims that eukaryotic cells came to be after many engulfings of prokaryotic cells that existed, a long time ago. Okay, so we are going to focus on this process occurring in the thylakoids and in the liquid outside of it, the stroma. Okay, looking at this, it is obvious that photosynthesis occurs in two parts. We have the light reactions, also called light-dependent reactions for obvious reasons. And we have the Calvin cycle, previously, and I guess still referred to as the light-independent reactions. Not the best name for it, but it is one that is oftentimes used. Okay, so light reactions for short and Calvin cycle, two parts of photosynthesis. Clearly, they are interconnected. Okay, they cannot produce sugars or oxygen without working with each other. Okay, again, looking at the big picture. In the first part of photosynthesis, what we have is light and water going as the input or the materials needed for the reaction to occur. So light and water are going into the into the thylakoid, and something happens there. We will look at what that something is. The outcome of this reaction, this light reaction, seems to be these two molecules right here being upgraded to these two molecules. And by upgraded, I mean they now have energy or they carry electrons to continue the process. So here are these two molecules. I'll explain them in more detail later. They're entering the light reactions looking like so. When they exit, they seem to have gained something. ADP became ATP. NADP plus became NADPH. Okay? The output is oxygen. So in the light reactions, light and water go in. These intermediates are transformed and oxygen is released as a byproduct. That's a very brief summary of the light reactions. Let's look at the Calvin cycle or the light independent reaction of photosynthesis. This part of the process relies on the input or the presence of ATP and NADPH. You know what ATP is? It's the carrier for energy. It's actual cellular energy. Whereas NADPH is considered an electron carrying molecule. It is a molecule that picks up electrons from the light reactions, takes it over to the Calvin cycle, and together with ATP make the production of sugars possible. Okay, so again, in the Calvin cycle, we are relying on energy, electrons brought by this molecule, and obviously the carbon dioxide to provide the raw materials for sugar. If you look at the CO2 and you look at the sugar structure, there's an obvious similarity. So the primary derivative of sugar, or the primary source of sugar, is actually carbon dioxide. Okay, that's where the sugar gets its C and its O. H's come from the light reactions. Okay, so light reactions, Calvin cycle. Input light and water, output oxygen, ATPs, NADPHs. Calvin cycle input CO2, ATP, NADPH, output sugar, and technically NADP plus and ADP once they enter in the cycle and are used up. You should be comfortable with this. Inputs, right? Outputs. Inputs, inputs, outputs. What goes into it, what comes out of it. Okay? Alrighty. Let's continue. After this slide, any information that I give you should go on the inside of your foldable. I know it's a bit blurry, but if you want me to show you in the classroom, let me know. So the inside of your foldable is where you're going to have the details and the visuals and all the important information per each part of photosynthesis. On the left side, you want to have this entire space for the light-dependent reactions or light reactions, and you want to have this entire space for the Calvin cycle. So divide that into half. You can do a little dashed line. When the flaps of the foldable close, they should meet at the dashed line. This is for the light reactions. This is for the Calvin cycle. Okay? Again, big picture, really important visual. I would not continue if you are having a hard time understanding this. Light and water input. NADP plus ADP input. Output ATP, NADPH, oxygen. Calvin cycle input CO2, ATP, NADPH. Output NADP plus and ADP. Most importantly, the sugars. So here are the ingredients or the reactants of the process, and here are the products. Glance at your formula real quick and verify that this is what goes into the reactant side, and this is what is in the product side of the formula for photosynthesis. Equation. Okay. You should have this already. Okay. Here's another sort of more detailed summary of each process in photosynthesis. In the light reactions, right? In the light reactions, here's what's going on. Okay, in the thylakoids of the chloroplast, solar energy, sunlight, is transformed to chemical energy. Okay, the water that is the input here enters the light reactions and it's split. When water is split, it releases electrons, it releases H plus protons, and it releases oxygen. Let's see. Water goes in, it's broken down, it's releasing electrons and protons, which are going to upgrade these two guys into these two guys, and also it's releasing O2 as a byproduct. Okay. let's look at this third bullet right here. It says in the light reactions, reduce, which means give electrons to. They reduce the electron acceptor NADP plus to NADPH. Let's see. In the light reactions, NADP plus is transformed to NADPH. The proper term for it is reduced, because reduced refers to gaining of electrons. Let me teach you something else real quick. There's a mnemonic device that you can use. It's called Leo goes Gur. Okay, Leo goes Gur. The Leo stands for lose electron oxidized, and the Gur stands for gain electron reduced. Leo goes Gur. That's Leo goes Gur, which is GER. So again, when we say reduced, we mean electrons are given to it. Leo goes Gur. Gain, electron, reduced. So this guy right here, NADP plus, is reduced, or it's reduced to NADPH. All that means is that it obtained electrons. It went from sort of an empty state to a state full of electrons. It was transformed or reduced into NADPH. And lastly, some ATPs are produced by joining a phosphate group onto ADPs through a process called photophosphorylation. Just the addition of a phosphate group onto ADP. Okay, so here we are again. ADP is energized to ATP. The Calvin cycle or the light independent reactions are a lot simpler, or at least you are required to know a lot less than the light reactions. So what happens in the chloroplast? What happens in the Calvin cycle of the photosynthesis is that in the stroma, so we're not in the thylakoids, we are now right here in this stroma. That's where the cycle occurs, in the stroma. All that's happening is sugars are formed from carbon dioxide with the help of energy and electrons brought by ATP and NADPH. Okay. This is the same information from the previous slide. So light reactions are more detailed, and they fuel the Calvin cycle to finally produce sugars. Here's a more complex summary in AP Bio verbiage. Take your time to read this. And then we will continue from here.